No, está desenfocado.
Good afternoon. We have now verified quorum with the Secretariat, and I hereby declare open the protocol session of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, which has been convened at the request of the Permanent Mission of Colombia to receive His Excellency, Mr. President Gustavo Petro Rego, the President of Colombia, pursuant to the Order of Business CDOD 2536, 2026, which is hereby adopted. This morning we stood to applaud women in multilateralism, and today we will do it, and I invite you all to stand in order to receive the President of Colombia.
Normalmente el presidente.
And so I will avoid any grandiose statements, but President Gustavo Petro Rego of Colombia, Madam Foreign Minister Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio Mapi, Ambassador Daniel Garcia Colombia of the Colombia to the United States, dear members of the Colombian delegation, distinguished permanent and alternate representatives of the OAS, Albert Ramdeen, Secretary General of the OAS, Ambassador Laura Gil, ASG, distinguished permanent observers, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly a privilege and an honor for me to be here at this time as Colombia has assumed the chairmanship of the Permanent Council in order to give a special welcome and warm greetings to the President of Colombia. As part of this protocol session of the Permanent Council, Mr. President, the Permanent Council once again is receiving you with great warmth in this hemispheric forum, a space for political dialogue in which the states of the Americas come together in order to give life to the principles enshrined in the OAS Charter and to examine from our diverse visions which characterize this organization the challenges that we face as a region, reiterating our commitment to the fundamental pillars of the inter-American system, that is democracy, human rights, integral development, and multidimensional security. Your presence at this session, President Petro, is particularly meaningful as it is an opportunity for the Permanent Council and the entire inter-American system to get to know firsthand the priorities and reflections of a head of state such as yourself, who is visiting us now for the second time during your mandate. And you have for some time now been so committed to multilateralism in the Americas and strengthening spaces for regional cooperation. When I received the procession for this position from you, I remember the words that you said, which I have repeated here on many occasions, that I was to come to try and work to consolidate this organization, to ensure that multilateralism be increasingly present every single day. This isn't an easy era. We see a lot of siege attacks, harassment today, And the issue of the response to this is something that has not been what the vast majority of people would have liked to see. And additionally, the second responsibility you entrusted me with was to work to strengthen the bodies of the system, that is the ISCHR and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights as well. Against this backdrop, the OAS should be viewed not only as a political and diplomatic space, but also as the expression of the deep ties that bring together the peoples of the Americas. We are bound by our shared values, such as brotherhood between our societies, living cultural identity marked by happiness and a passion for life, as well as the expressions that see us as brothers beyond borders, like sports, for example, soccer. And that is why multilateralism within our OAS must always be reflected as a vocation of union and understanding, focusing on what brings us together above any differences we may have, strengthening our shared identity, which finds its greatest wealth and strength in our diversity, so that one day we will be able to say that truly the Americas are for all Americans, whether North American, Central American, or South American. Mr. President, your decisive impetus to this lasting, comprehensive, sustainable peace based on respect for human dignity and strengthening our democratic institutions is a beacon for the hemisphere. We must also underscore your efforts to place human rights at the very heart of our public actions and promoting dialogue and consultation as essential tools for reconciliation and social cohesion. Speaking of dialogue with you, and you can certainly express this as well, this is more than gratifying. I know a president who is absolutely dedicated to dialogue, who is focused on the three vortices of good faith dialogue and understanding as we build things that should truly nourish the Americas, and that dialogue that you have been constantly driving, and much more through love. This is something that must be consolidated much more in these spaces at the OAS. This vision is reflected in the leadership that you have demonstrated on the multilateral stage, where you have staunchly defended prioritizing life, promoting an fair, clean energy transition, moving toward a zero-carbon economy, and underscoring the urgency of acting in the face of the climate crisis that you have talked about as a climate collapse. Similarly, your voice has been determining in driving reflection and reviewing an international policy on drugs aimed at overcoming the traditional punitive approach and instead inviting the international community to set up a new model that hitherto has seen limits, not the efficiency that we need. And therefore, we see that the prosecution of drug traffickers and not rural people in this America should really have a space here within this OAS. Similarly, we value your ongoing call to strengthen regional cooperation and multilateralism as a sine qua non path toward addressing our shared challenges together, such as inequality, social exclusion, violence, and threats to democracy. In a hemispheric context that's particularly complex, that leadership, which has chosen the path of cooperation and understanding between states, has become particularly relevant. As stated by our Nobel laureate Gabriel Garcia Marquez in his historic speech upon receiving the Nobel Prize, I quote, "Despite our difficulties and the suffering that we share, Latin America has a rich reality full of life, creativity, and solidarity among its peoples. This region, with its diversity and shared history, possesses the strength to come together and build its own destiny." End quote. The Permanent Council is an ideal space for this frank, respectful dialogue among member states. Your presence today reiterates that collective work, solidarity, and mutual respect are key factors to moving toward a fairer, more peaceful, and inclusive region. Mr. President, Gustavo Petro, we give you the warmest welcome to this Permanent Council, and we wish you a fruitful session during today's session. Thank you very much.
We now have the pleasure of giving the floor to the Secretary General, Ambassador Randin, who will now speak. You have the floor, sir. Good afternoon, one and all.
Monseñor Gustavo Petro.
Excellency, Mr. Gustavo Pedro Obrero, President of the Republic of Colombia, Minister Rosa Yolanda Mapi, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Colombia, Ambassador Luis Alberto Ragas, Chair of the Permanent Council, Assistant Secretary General, Ambassador Daniel Aramillo, Representative of Colombia before the OAS, Permanent Representative Ambassadors to the OAS, permanent observers, distinguished guests, colleagues from the Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen. Excellency, Mr. President, it's an honor to welcome you to the Organization of American States. Your visit takes place at a time when Colombia is chairing the Permanent Council, and I should like to recognize specifically the excellent efforts of your ambassador at the helm of this body. Sir, Colombia is in a unique position in history with a living identity in this organization. It was in Bogota in 1948 where the charter of the OAS was signed, which gave institutional life to the principles of cooperation, democracy, solidarity, which continue to prevail in our hemisphere for a united, peaceful, and prosperous hemisphere. As we approach the celebration of 30 years of the Charter, this is a reflection of a lasting legacy of our organization. It has been practical and sustained in nature. The OAS has deployed a number of observer missions to Colombia, which has brought technical assistance and which has built trust with regard to the electoral process. Colombia has, moreover, hosted dialogue for the hemisphere very generously. It received the organization and its member states on many occasions, as in General Assemblies that were held in Cartagena and also in Medellin, the Summit of the Americas that was held in Cartagena, and in various ministerial level meetings that were hosted in Colombia. We have OAS has an important presence in the country through the support mission for the peace process in Colombia. This has accompanied national efforts undertaken to promote peace for more than 2 decades. This mission cooperates with institutions and Colombian bodies that continue to be central to stability and democratic life, and we hope that will continue. Since assuming the post of president, President Pietro has pushed forward an ambitious agenda, meeting social challenges and institutional challenges head-on to promote peace, social justice, and regional cooperation under his stewardship. His government, your government, Mr. President, has consolidated peace. Total peace has been at the heart of your quest for peaceful solutions to conflicts, with solutions geared to reducing inequality, broaden social protections, and strengthen the link between the state and citizens through democratic governance. Mr. President, you have consolidated Colombia as an influential voice for climate action and protection of the environment, especially in the defense of the Amazon region and clean energy. Also, you have reaffirmed your commitment to dialogue and multilateralism and greater unity through active participation in regional spaces and hemispheric spaces. Thank you very much for all of that. You have also promoted the idea of a hemispheric civilization based on diversity and founded in common values to serve as a basis for deeper integration and greater capacity for collective action. True, our obligation to the millions of people who live in our region is not just about the fortunate effect, the fact that they were born and live within the borders of our hemisphere, but also it is especially due to the fact that they, in the midst of their diversity, conform to cultural unity within that. Moreover, you had an impact on life and freedom in the Americas as principles that guide regional cooperation. Mr. President, Colombia is a country shaped by memory, resilience. It's a nation that has faced adversity with dignity, that has met challenges creatively, and which continues to look to the future with confidence. That generous spirit, which is resilient and profoundly human, has allowed you to provide a living example for our hemisphere. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the liberator Simón Bolívar, the nations of the hemisphere, along with them, have gone through difficult moments of their own historical labyrinth, marked by fragmentation, difficulties, and deep-seated divisions and challenges. However, they have also demonstrated time and again their ability to find ways out through dialogue, unity, and political determination. Mr. President, it's in that spirit that we welcome you to this organization of the American states. This provides us with an opportunity to renew our commitment to dialogue, to cooperation, and to shoulder our mutual responsibility for the future of the Americas. Thank you very much.
A continuación.
And now, as I stated, it's a privilege to give the floor to the President of the Republic of Colombia, Gustavo Petro Urrego. Mr. President, I give you the floor.
Señor Secretario General.
Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Albert Ramdin. Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Colombia, Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio. Chairman of the Permanent Council, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Colombia, Luis Ernesto Vargas. Assistant Secretary General of the OAS, Laura Gil, a Colombian woman, and I believe the first woman to hold the position of Assistant Secretary General, proposed by my government and elected. That's great. And fundamental in these issues and discussions of psychoactive substances in Vienna before the UN agency. She came from there to this position. Ambassadors, permanent representatives before the OAS, officials of the National Government of Colombia and national and international media, and in general, to all of those who are with us today. Well, I was here before, and this will be my last speech here. I gave the first one, and this is my last one as President of Colombia. I recall what I said on that occasion, and this is useful as a moment to evaluate the proposals I made to see what has happened after several years. We have had what I consider to be an interesting government. It'll be up to the people to assess it. They are the real ones who evaluate the governments. But I would like to recall a few things and to have a comparison and contrast with those words I said on that occasion, that in effect, the OAS is founded. It was founded in several moments. It wasn't just a single moment. It was a process. And the first was in our country. At that time, it had other borders. The Anfitrionic Congress of Panama. At the time, it was the Republic of Gran Colombia. And no doubt, why there? Why Panama? Well, I said this yesterday. I said it this morning as well. We are the heart of the world, geometrically speaking and vitally speaking. And that led to a meeting of the Society of the Americas that had recently liberated themselves from colonies, from kings, and so on. Well, most of them chose that place to come together. And then I mentioned it here at another moment that set a footing for the OAS on April 1948, Bogota. Near Panama, at a much higher altitude, also was part of that same geometric and vital possibility of being the heart of the world. There's some reason why that meeting was held there. But that coincided with the beginning of our genocide, the genocide of Colombia, which has never been judged, but it has left to this day, and it has yet to conclude, 700,000 persons killed, assassinated, men and women, the vast majority humble people, particularly people from the countryside, workers, working people, peasant farmers, campesinos. Why? Because it was an ongoing struggle for fertile land. I'm not going to talk about that history. It would take too long. And that struggle to possess land very much in a Spanish feudal style has left us with the fundamental problems that Colombia faces today, those that I face as president. One of the most unequal countries in the world. Terrible social injustice that we have tried to get a handle on. We've tried to diminish it. Quite a bit of violence, which has drastically declined if I compare it to 1993. Of the 1,100 municipalities today, for example, 750 at least have not had a single murder this year. And problems that inundate the hemisphere today and the whole world, such as those caused by the owners of drug trafficking. There could be a full lecture on that, but this is not the occasion for it. They have taken over power, regions, and life and death in numerous regions which are no longer just of Colombia, but also Latin America, Caribbean, and even the United States, and which are expanding to Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, and so on, under what I have called a new multinational. Contemporary problems which we could bring together with the climate crisis, which is not yet a collapse, but there's mathematics between crisis and collapse. What is the difference? The collapse would mean extinction of life on the planet. The crisis, which we have today, well, you only need to go out to the streets to see it. The difference between crisis and collapse is whether we're going to be capable of transforming the way in which energy is produced and consumed. And it appears, I've concluded this from my experience, it is also a change in how power is held and exercised. And here I would like to tell you a few things that I would like to leave with you today. Habermas, the German philosopher, well, I sometimes think naively that a parliament, this is a sort of parliament of nations, would accept being frank as a means of communication. That's Habermas. The rational interaction which he considered to be superior reason. These republics have all been built around the beginning of reason. But he said there's a reason of reasons, and the superior reason is frank dialogue, sitting around a table. At that time, I had not read a Greek concept, paresia in Spanish, and which was written by a philosopher who was a neighbor of Habermas. There were the Germans and the French, and this is Foucault. And the conclusion which comes from the history of Socrates is that parricide means one must either go into exile or die, or defeat the tyrant, as in the life of Socrates. Or you either convince the other, or you go into exile or suicide, because Socrates committed suicide, I believe. So what we're talking about is speaking frankly, speaking with truth, or with what one is attempting to, trying to reach the truth. There are two different dynamics, and it seems that Socrates was more right than Habermas. But here we need to ask once again whether we want to be a living human species in this planet. If we do, we need a frank dialogue with no subordination. No one is right per se. Being right is collective. But if we don't have that frankness that is brandished by science today, then we will never be able to convince others or to reach a superior reason or to see human survival in coming decades, centuries, or millennia. So here I was asking the Secretary General, what use is the OAS? What is it for? When I came in 2023, I put forward a proposal here, some of those here today were there, and that is that the American Convention on Human Rights had to be reformed. That the American Convention, as an international treaty approved by all of the nations here, it's now incorporated into the Constitution of Colombia, it needed to be reformed, and not to cut back on rights, but rather to expand rights. I am a beneficiary of the American Convention on Human Rights. I am here as president of Colombia, not only because the people voted for me, but also because of the American Convention on Human Rights. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. There's the Petro judgment at the Inter-American Court. It's well known. And that made it such that my rights were reestablished. My fundamental individual rights to elect and be elected had been violated in Colombia by a fascist, whose names I won't repeat because I'm now moving away from that debate. It was the Inter-American Court, after the Commission, in a judgment that restored my rights and the Colombian justice system, and thanks to that, I was able to participate in an election and be elected. Today, the majorities who dominate electoral power in Colombia are limiting my forces from being able to register rights. The same once again, but the right to elect and be elected, which is Article 23 of the American Convention on Human Rights, it refers to individual rights. Very liberal, yes, if we look at it from that angle. It was done by liberal currents in the 1960s and 70s who dominated and had the will to do so in most of the governments of the republics seated here. That political will made it possible sometime after 1948, and even in the midst of the massacre and genocide unfolding in Colombia, it made it possible to establish a sort of Constitution of the Americas. I must say it here. I mean American in our sense. That is, it includes the United States, but it's not limited to the United States. And so now, to put it into contemporary language, I have to say the Americas, and to add that S, because this is a diverse hemisphere, very diverse. And this diversity is represented right here, the American Convention of the Americas. It addresses individual rights. It's part of a generation, of a way of understanding the world. We dreamed of a liberal global democracy. And that is why several countries are not here, because they've thought about something else. But today, in the 21st century, in this year, 2026, is that enough? Or if it is not, and we stick with it, isn't that spell the end of the OAS? That is more or less the question I ask myself. Now this institution, which has been so effective in certain periods, has ceased to be so. And if it doesn't latch on to the efficiency of this time, then it simply has no raison d'etre. Some money lost? Well, there's a discussion that I did not, along these lines, that I did not put forward last time, but I would like to put forward now. I said on that time, April 19th, 2023, it seems to me that the American Convention on Human Rights of the Americas needs to be rounded out by women's rights, which are not to be found there, by the rights of nature that are not to be found there, and by collective and social rights, which are not to be found there. And so a good part of the problematic of the everyday existence of any citizen, child, older person in any of our republics, and if they're not respected, then they cannot be considered here. There's no power here. It is incapable, I'm sorry for saying so, or impotent. But worse still, if it's not the OAS, then it's the United Nations, and we find the same problem at the United Nations. The United Nations was not able to stop the genocide in Gaza. And I state this clearly and with no fear. To the pareciastas, well, we are not judged for actions that we committed, that may have been illegal. We are judged for our words. when we say them. That is my history in Colombia and worldwide. And I cannot deny the existence of a reality and a truth. If the United Nations was founded for there to not be any more genocide, such as that committed by the German state under the Nazis, vis-a-vis Soviets, Chinese, Japanese, Jews, and other peoples of the world, if it was founded for that purpose and it was unable to stop the genocide in Gaza, then what use is it? Its very existence is called into question. It's as simple as that. It doesn't have power. And so if we look at this issue, then, in my opinion, we are facing the main debate that humanity needs to wage in the Americas. From the Roman Empire we learned, and I'm criticized for saying in Colombia that Latin America is the descendant in number of persons of the Roman Empire. That's not the only figure in our ancestry. We come from Africa, brought by force as slaves. Some freed themselves by throwing themselves from the ships in the Antilles, and they formed a beautiful culture known as the Garifuna culture. We had a convention regarding those peoples in San Andres, Colombia, in the Western Caribbean. And others came 60,000 years ago, as far as we know. In these lands, there were no borders, and they were able to move about freely from Alaska to Patagonia. And these were civilizations, profound civilizations. And we come from Arabs because they came on the ships, and they came as well, and so on. We have multiple ancestors that make it such that these peoples from the Rio Grande southward, including the Caribbean, are different from one another, or different from other peoples who have different ancestors, but in common, the persons of African descent and the Amerindian persons. So the question is, if we go back to this Latin American ancestry, look at these columns. Where do you think these columns came from? Not physically, but architecturally speaking, they came from a culture. You have the tops of the, these are Greek. And then they went to Rome, if we look at the tops of the columns. So we're talking about something which they, among others, taught in their own history. Barbarism or civilization? That's what I wrote here outside. That was their dynamic, independent of their time or their history, or the way in which their conflicts unfolded. Civilization or barbarism? They called those who didn't drink wine barbarian to distinguish themselves from them. They did not. They combined the word vit from wine, life, vida. I leave that for another time. It was the same word. How they would celebrate their victories and their very existence. So, but civilization or barbarism, what would we say today, here, today? With all of the different bloods of the world running through our veins, especially in Colombia, civilization or barbarism, I would ask the OAS, and I also asked the President of the United States, Donald Trump, this question yesterday. We, Colombians, ask ourselves this, we who have killed one another. And the only thing that the ancestors from Rome would tell us, picking up on Greek ideas, is laws, rules to save us from barbarism, barbarity. And where are our rules? And here is where my problems begin. we construct them collectively? Yes, the American Convention on Human Rights. There's an energy here. There are always clashing energies, and that is the debate. That is what Habermas called frank exchange or dialogue. But if the laws and norms constructed collectively can defend us from barbarity, and the OAS is an example of this, 1948 and onward, the American Convention on Human Rights was not to deepen the laws so as to not unleash the barbarism. And if we put this in the context of the century and humankind, my question is, aren't we seeing barbarism go forward at a quick and strong pace rather than dialogue? Then this barbarity can be unleashed until it even consumes those who have brandished its own flag. So we need to go back to collective norms, collective laws. Will history repeat itself, the OAS coming together once again? No, I don't think so. On April 19th, I asked, and there was no single working group to do this, Secretary General, that we should begin to draft the chapter of the American Convention on human rights, on women's rights, on the rights of nature, on social and collective rights, and not a word was said. If, as far as I know, maybe I'm mistaken, but not a word was said. So in these 3 years, my colleague, Ambassador Vargas, we didn't move towards the laws, towards collectively constructed norms. To where did we go? As I see it, to a greater inability. As I see it, the regulations or rules of procedure of the American Commission on Human Rights were changed as soon as the Petro judgment came out, because how is it possible that a man like Petro could have rights to elect and be elected, and then he becomes president of Colombia? Well, he became president of Colombia because of the right of the people, but we begin to co-opt based on the domestic politics of each country, be it right, be it left, the rights of others, the right to participate. And therein lies the problem of Venezuela, for example. I'm a little bit aware of it, but I can't really talk about it if they're not here. They should be here. But political exclusion is nothing other than violence. It is the rupture of dialogue and is the beginning of barbarity. So what do? The United Nations, the world, humankind. Can the nations resolve the issues coming together, as was the idea of the United Nations, the serious problems that humanity faces? Was it capable of stopping the genocide? If it could not stop the genocide in Gaza, there will be more genocides. And it won't just be one point or a city, it'll be entire civilizations. If we are not capable of constructing collective law and collective norms to bring together humankind, if not, there will be barbarity. When I talk about the climate crisis and climate collapse, it's not just play on words. It is simply that I believe that we need to listen to science. Colombia was the only country that did not sign and objected to, and therefore there's no declaration out of the COP30. There was a disagreement with President Lula. We were alone. There was an alliance with Africa, with Western Europe, but it came undone along the way because economic interests of those who are standing in the way of the change in energy did not want a phrase on science to be reflected in the declaration coming out of COP30. the meeting that was held in Belém do Pará. 55% of the climate crisis is produced by the consumption of oil, coal, gas, hydrocarbons. And this is science, not politics. And Colombia simply asked that that phrase be written, which comes from science. It doesn't come from Colombia. And all of the nations of the world that had come together there did not join us. We were alone, like in 100 years of solitude. We're accustomed to, well, I'm accustomed to it, and no declaration came out of it unless some trick was done there, and that happens too. So if science is right, we are living the times in which if we don't make decisions and adopt quick laws and norms quickly, we move from the crisis to the collapse. And if it's the collapse, it's irreversible. And nothing we do would be useful. Our children will live a life, those from Argentina, Colombia, the United States, Canada, Europe, etc., worse than what we have experienced. That is what science says. And why? Because what we call wealth and progress will become undone as we burn up in the heat. And what follows, if we're not able to act now, it is our children and all of humanity and our grandchildren. Well, let's not even talk about that. Let's not even talk about it. That is what science says. All you need to do is read it or allow it to appear in the press or the media and discuss it here. I do think that a progressive policy, a policy that is enlightened by science rather than hiding science. Otherwise, if it's the lantern of Diogenes, humankind would be lost. We would have been gone extinct some time ago. But rather, it's because we learn. If we weren't learning from one another and turning on that lamp, we would not exist. So it's time to turn on that lamp, but it is on, but the powers say, don't look at it, don't look up. Patagonia is burning. The forests in the south of Chile are burning. 200 river dolphins died in the Amazon River. The Amazon region is burning. The region where I was born is now flooded by waters that are coming from both the mountains and the sea. The Panama Canal, mathematically speaking, is going to die. All you need to do is calculate the sea level rise and see how Lake Gatun is drying up and see whether the engineering works done there can withstand it. And we could talk about 1,000 examples, but I'm not going to go on and on about that. It's simply, we're simply drawing attention to it. And if humankind is facing such challenges, if fentanyl comes in to this city from industrial inputs that don't need the land and turns 500,000 people into zombies in this country, we cannot be happy about it and say that it doesn't work. Of course, this is going to happen to our societies. And if you bring together the drug of death, because that's not a psychoactive substance, that is poison, deadly. The drug of the climate crisis. Because why does a citizen take fentanyl? They inject it, I think, because they want to commit suicide, because they don't see any future, they don't see any progress, they don't see love. What they see is humanity, which is like a whole group people falling off a precipice. So what do we do about it at the OAS? That is my question. If these are today's problems, if we're moving towards a climate collapse, if we're moving towards a vital psychoactive collapse, Pope Francis said this for those who are Catholic, a crisis of civilization, a crisis of civilization is cultural, but it's a cultural crisis, and the human species represents the death of the species. So it is civilization or barbarity, asking the Roman Senate at that time. They were all men. Are we going to choose the path of barbarity? And so is it okay then for the missiles to fall? Is it good that those who die under the missiles be tens of thousands of children? Is that okay? Is it plausible? Or do we have to tell the truth and stand up? And of course, there could be punishment, but for those who stand up for humankind. But we are human beings, and there's a reality, which is that as a species, we want to live as a species. And there's some who announce that there is the abysm, and we have to turn away from it. There have always been, since this has always been the case, since there have been horses. There's a notice. If you continue in this direction, then the whole group is meeting its end. And we have been put on notice, so we have to discuss this. Can the American Convention be changed by one that is no longer based on individualist liberalism, but also see that we are a species that has great power, which is to think collectively, using our brains, unique in the universe. Show me somewhere else in the universe where a telescope, the most powerful one of the latest spacecrafts, could show that there is some human brain and anywhere else in the universe. And if it does not exist, as we know is the case today, then perhaps there will be intelligent energy. I'm not going to get into any religious or physical discussions about this. But the human brain operates collectively, not individually. Bringing together the brains of humanity is how we will be able to save life on the planet. We're the ones who are responsible for it. And then go out into the universe. Astram, ad astram, as the Romans would say. What for? To bring life. And that means technology, wisdom, science. And that can be done by a single country. That can only be done by humankind. And we will live. But in the meantime, either we craft laws and norms collectively, or we will fall into barbarism. And then reestablishing human sisterhood. I'm not talking about nations. I would take this opportunity to say that perhaps if the nations can no longer do it, then it is up to the peoples and civilizations to join together. And in the Americas, there are different civilizations. And I asked the Secretary General to try, based on real efforts at unity, which we see in the Southern Cone, in North America, in what was once Gran Colombia, let's see if the people can express themselves and say if they want it or not. And in other parts of the world where we see a new associativity and a growing one that could be the basis of human sisterhood or a dialogue among civilizations. We can find the same thing in the Americas. That is, it is not a human failure that multilateral institutions have been left without any power. That is not yet necessarily barbarity. There is another path, and that would be a dialogue among civilizations, a congress of peoples, sisterhood of the Americas and of humankind. Perhaps it's a change in epoch, and we need to leave behind what was not of use and begin to build what is useful, but we don't have much time to do it. The timelines of science say we don't even have a century. Otherwise, it will be irreversible. And the changes in how energy is produced and consumed, which is so easily described by experts in technology and engineers, is only possible with changes in how power is exercised and with changes in society. And so a global democracy is the banner that we must lift up. A democracy of the Americas, where we have collective and legitimate norms and laws that guide us to oppose the barbarity, because if the barbarity is and barbarism is from Alaska to Patagonia, we may well disappear. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having heard what I've had to say today.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to all of the delegations for attending this protocolary session, which will adjourn with our words of thanks to the President for his intervention, and we will give the floor to protocol so that they can explain how we will proceed now. Thank you very much. We will be leaving in protocolary order. Dear ambassadors, please come through the main entrance. The other delegations can walk through the back door in order to greet the delegation of the President. Thank you very much.
Se levanta la sesión y buenas tardes.